The old man standing on the porch looked like someone the world had forgotten. His coat was torn at the sleeves, his shoes were held together with pieces of wire, and the cold rain dripping from his gray beard made him appear even more miserable. But what happened on that porch that evening would soon destroy a secret that had been buried for nearly 20 years. "Take her!" the woman screamed. The homeless man blinked in confusion. "What?" he asked. "I said take her. If you're so desperate for charity, take my useless stepdaughter and leave my property." The 16-year-old girl standing beside the doorway froze. Her name was Emily. She had endured years of cruelty from her stepmother, Margaret. But even she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Margaret shoved a small backpack into Emily's chest. "You've been nothing but a burden since your father died." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Please, I have nowhere to go." "I don't care." The homeless man stepped forward. "Ma'am, I wasn't asking for anything except food." Margaret laughed. "Then take both, the food and the girl." The old man looked at Emily. Something strange flickered across his face. For a brief moment, shock. Then recognition. But it disappeared so quickly that nobody noticed. Emily trembled. "Please don't do this." Margaret pointed toward the road. "Get off my property before I call the police." Without another word, she slammed the door. The loud bang echoed through the rain. Emily stood motionless. The old man stared at the closed door for several seconds. Then he slowly turned toward her. "You okay, kid?" She laughed bitterly.
No.
He nodded. "Neither am I." For the first time that night, Emily almost smiled. The old man introduced himself as Samuel. They walked through the rain together. Emily expected him to leave her eventually, but he didn't. Instead, he shared half of the stale bread someone had given him earlier. It wasn't much, yet it was more kindness than Margaret had shown her in years. They found shelter beneath an abandoned bus station. Samuel spread his worn blanket across the bench. "You sleep. What about you?" "I've slept in worse places." Emily shook her head. "We can share." Samuel looked at her carefully. There was something about her face that kept pulling his attention. Something familiar. Something impossible. The entire night he barely slept. He kept staring at a small silver necklace hanging around Emily's neck. A necklace shaped like a tiny star. The next morning, Samuel woke before sunrise. Emily was still asleep. His eyes remained fixed on the necklace. His hands began shaking. Because 20 years earlier, he had bought an identical necklace for someone he loved more than life itself. A woman named Charlotte. The only woman he had ever loved. The mother of his missing daughter. A daughter who had vanished after a tragic accident and was presumed dead. Samuel quietly reached into his pocket. Inside was an old photograph. The picture was faded and damaged. Yet the woman wearing the same star necklace was unmistakable. Charlotte. Samuel felt his heart pounding violently. He looked back at Emily. Then at the photograph. Then at Emily again. Couldn't be. Could it? When she finally woke up, Samuel asked carefully, "Where did you get that necklace?" Emily touched it. "I've always had it. Always." She nodded. "My father said my real mother gave it to me before she died." Samuel's breath caught in his throat. "What was your mother's name?" "Charlotte." The world seemed to stop. Samuel nearly collapsed. Emily immediately grabbed him. "Are you okay?" But Samuel wasn't listening anymore. His eyes were full of tears, because Charlotte had never died. At least not when everyone thought she had. Years ago, Charlotte had disappeared during a boating accident. Authorities assumed she drowned. Samuel searched for years. Eventually, he lost everything. His business, his home, his savings, his sanity. The search consumed his life until nothing remained. And now, sitting in front of him, was a girl carrying the necklace Charlotte once wore. The same girl Charlotte had desperately tried to protect. His granddaughter. Emily stared at him. "Why are you crying?" Samuel looked at her. Because after 2 decades of misery, fate had delivered the answer directly onto Margaret's porch. The answer she had thrown away. 3 days later, Samuel convinced Emily to accompany him to a nearby city. She trusted him, more than she trusted anyone else. They arrived at a law office. Emily frowned. "What are we doing here?" Samuel smiled. "Finding the truth." Inside, an elderly lawyer nearly fainted when he saw Samuel. "Dear God, it's been a long time." The lawyer nodded. "Everyone thought you were dead." "Not yet." The lawyer looked at Emily, then at Samuel. Then understanding slowly appeared across his face. Within hours, hidden files began emerging. Documents, birth records, custody papers, medical reports. A terrifying story unfolded. Charlotte had survived the accident, severely injured but alive. While recovering in a hospital overseas, she desperately tried contacting her family. But someone intercepted every message. Someone who wanted her gone. Someone who wanted access to the fortune belonging to Charlotte's family. That someone was Margaret. Years before marrying Emily's father, Margaret had discovered the existence of an enormous inheritance tied to Charlotte's bloodline. If Charlotte returned, everything would pass to her descendants. Margaret spent years hiding the truth, years manipulating everyone, years ensuring Emily would never learn who she really was. But she had made one catastrophic mistake. She assumed Samuel was gone forever. She assumed nobody could connect the pieces. She was wrong, very wrong. Meanwhile, Margaret sat comfortably inside her luxurious house. She felt victorious, finally free of Emily, finally free of the burden. Then a black vehicle stopped outside. A second vehicle followed. Then a third. Margaret frowned. Men in expensive suits exited the cars. One of them approached her door. When she opened it, she immediately recognized the lawyer. "What is this?" The lawyer handed her a document. Margaret's face drained of color. "No." "Yes." "No." "The court has reopened the inheritance case." Margaret staggered backward. "That's impossible." "Not anymore." Her hands trembled as she read. Every property, every bank account, every investment, frozen immediately, pending investigation. Margaret's knees nearly gave out. "What happened?" The lawyer's expression hardened. "You threw away the wrong girl." The next few weeks became a nightmare. Investigators uncovered forged signatures, hidden accounts, stolen assets, destroyed correspondence. The evidence was overwhelming. Margaret's empire began collapsing piece by piece. Friends disappeared. Business partners vanished. Lawyers resigned. The woman who once controlled everything suddenly controlled nothing. But the greatest shock was still coming. 1 month later, Emily stood inside a massive estate overlooking the ocean. The mansion belonged to Charlotte's family, the rightful family, her family. Samuel stood beside her. "There's someone waiting." Emily's heart raced. A woman slowly entered the room. Gray streaks ran through her hair. Tears streamed down her face. For several seconds, neither spoke. Neither moved. Then the woman whispered, "Emily?" The girl's legs nearly collapsed. "Mom!" Charlotte broke down completely. She ran forward. Mother and daughter crashed into each other's arms, both sobbing uncontrollably. 20 years of separation ended in a single moment. Samuel turned away, unable to hide his own tears. The room filled with grief, relief, joy, pain. Every lost year poured out at once. Eventually Charlotte looked at her daughter. "I never stopped searching." Emily cried harder. "I thought you were dead." "So did I." The two held each other for what felt like hours. Outside, the ocean waves crashed against the cliffs, as if nature itself were celebrating. Months later, Margaret stood inside a courtroom. Gone were the designer clothes. Gone was the confidence. Gone was the power. The evidence against her was devastating. The judge listened carefully, then delivered a ruling that stunned the room. Margaret would lose everything obtained through fraud. Every property, every asset, every account, all returned to the rightful heirs. Emily, Charlotte, and Samuel. Margaret stared at them from across the courtroom. Hatred burned in her eyes. But nobody cared anymore. She had spent years believing Emily was worthless. Years convincing herself that the girl was nothing. Now the truth stood before everyone. Emily wasn't worthless. She was the rightful heir to a fortune worth hundreds of millions. More importantly, she was surrounded by people who genuinely loved her. As security escorted Margaret away, she shouted one final insult. Emily simply smiled, not because she enjoyed revenge, but because Margaret no longer had power over her. The chapter of fear had ended. A new life had begun. That evening the family gathered on the estate's terrace. The sunset painted the sky gold and crimson. Samuel sat quietly watching the horizon. Emily walked over. "You know something funny?" "What?" "If Margaret hadn't thrown me away." Samuel laughed. "We might never have found each other." Emily nodded. The realization sent chills through both of them. One act of cruelty had accidentally exposed decades of lies. One desperate decision had reunited an entire family. And one homeless man standing on a porch had turned out to be the key to a mystery that everyone believed was buried forever. Samuel looked toward the ocean. For years he had wandered streets believing life had abandoned him. Believing hope was dead. Believing everything worth loving had disappeared. But fate had been writing a different story. A story hidden beneath loss and suffering. A story waiting for the perfect moment. And it began the night a cruel woman opened her front door, looked at a homeless stranger, pointed at her stepdaughter, and said the words that destroyed her own future forever. "Take her." The irony was almost unbelievable, because the homeless man she mocked wasn't a nobody. He was the only person capable of revealing the truth she had spent 20 years hiding. And by giving away her stepdaughter, Margaret hadn't gotten rid of a burden. She had handed the rightful heir back to the family that had been searching for her all along. The moment she slammed that door, she thought she had one. In reality, she had just lost everything.